On today's show, we are going to discuss the fallout of every important free agency move so far, why teams did what they did, who we think won the deals, and what the fantasy impact is. Going to go in loose order of importance here. Number one, Seahawks trade DK Metcalf to the Steelers for a round 2 pick. It will be number 52 overall. Steelers then turn around and sign DK Metcalf to a 5-year, $150 million contract. I want to start with the Steelers side of this, Evan. They've been trying to add wide receiver help for years, it seems like. They were all over Brandon Ayuk last summer. They pursued plenty of other wide receivers unsuccessfully. They finally get a deal done here to pair DK Metcalf with George Pickens. Evan, what is your reaction to this Metcalf trade from the Steelers' point of view?
Well, from a fantasy point of view, I would not feel real good about DK Metcalf if I owned him in a dynasty league. This is not a good situation for him, regardless of who the Steelers quarterback is going to be. And we don't even know who their quarterback is going to be. I don't even know if they have a quarterback under contract right now. I think that they do not have a quarterback under contract. There have been rumors surrounding Aaron Rodgers, maybe Russell Wilson returning. We'll figure that out. But this is going to be a run-heavy offense under Arthur Smith. That's what he believes in. They have built up the offensive line with a ton of big-time draft picks in recent years. Their offensive line was good last year. They've got 2 tight ends that they can play in the 12 personnel with Pat Freiermuth and Darnell Washington. And then if you think about it schematically, Arthur Smith, in order to stretch the field and not have defenses able to crowd the line of scrimmage, you got George Pickens on one side, who's your perimeter contested catch winner. And then you got DK Metcalf, who can just run by guys, who runs like 4.3 at like almost 240 pounds. So schematically, it makes sense for them to really reach the peak of what they can do offensively within the confines of Arthur Smith's scheme. It was a lot of money. They gave up, a second-round pick. I actually do wonder if they might dangle George Pickens. I mean, he caused a lot of problems for the team last year, but when he wasn't available and when his head wasn't in the game, their offense was trash. So I don't know. He's really cheap, and I don't even know what you could get for him. So I think that they probably end up hanging on to him. But right now you have 2 guys who can win on the perimeter.
Well, I'm curious what you think of the fit with those 2 guys. It sounds like you like it. My first thought was both of these guys win deep down the field, right? And that kind of fits
in very different ways, though.
Okay, and that kind of fits with Russell Wilson, who is still out there in free agency. I don't think Russ is very good anymore, but he certainly can still throw a very good deep ball. I'm not sold that DK Metcalf should just be pigeonholed as go deep, run past guys, and pray. I think he can do other things, whereas George Pickens maybe is more of that contested catch guy, good contested catch guy up the sideline. My bigger concern on this is the Arthur Smith stuff. I really, really hope they talk to Arthur Smith sternly about this George Pickens move before doing it. You just gave up a round 2 pick plus $30 million a year for a, at times, petulant, at times, hot-headed wide receiver. Remember, this is the same Arthur Smith who couldn't have cared less that the Falcons used the number 4 pick on Kyle Pitts, the number 8 pick on Drake London, the number 8 pick on Bijan Robinson. He did zero to try to capitalize on those guys' skill sets and talent. He was scheming things up for Alamadi Zacchaeus and Jonnu Smith and Tyler Algier. So I don't trust Arthur Smith to get the most out of both of these guys. And also, people are like, oh, now the Steelers are a Super Bowl contender. And I know there are some people out there who thought when they were playing well last season, they were a Super Bowl contender. In the AFC, man, I never really thought that. And I still don't think that about the Steelers. So yeah, any more thoughts, Evan, before we move on here on Steelers offense?
Just talking about in real life, on paper, I think it makes a lot of sense. And theoretically, if you were going to want to run the ball with extreme volume, you want to have guys that can win on the perimeter so defenses can't just crouch on your offense.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, yeah, when you factor in I don't think that, especially in the way that we think about things, in our terms, the way that we use the terminology of getting the most out of a player, I mean, what does that mean for DK Metcalf? 70 catches, 1,200 yards, and 8 touchdowns? I mean, he ain't getting that in an Arthur Smith offense.
Well, they've been linked to Aaron Rodgers, who we'll see if they end up with him. They've been linked to getting back linked to getting back Russell Wilson. Justin Fields we'll get to in a second, is gone. So yeah, it's super interesting in Pittsburgh right now. And man, if things start to go bad, I mean, Metcalf and Pickens, like I've seen these guys, both of them, just not have their head on straight a lot of the time, so I'd be worried about that. Okay. Let's go to the Seahawks side of this trade. So Seahawks, they trade DK Metcalf. They avoid paying him the $30 million a year. They get a round 2 pick back. Cool. Then they also trade Geno Smith to the Raiders for a round 3 pick. They turn around Monday, sign free agent Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal worth roughly $100 million. So now you have Darnold. You don't have Lockett. You don't have Metcalf. You do have JSN. Evan, your thoughts on what the Seahawks have done so far in this new calendar year?
Well, I've seen a lot of criticism of the Seahawks getting rid of Geno Smith and going after and acquiring Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold was actually a little bit cheaper on a per-year basis than Geno Smith. He's several years younger, and the Seahawks got a third-round pick out of this whole ordeal. So I think it does make sense when you put it in those terms. The issue is all of a sudden you got Jackson Smith and Jigba. I guess Noah Fant is going to be staying around.
Yeah, he was a cut candidate, but so far he's still here. Yep.
Right. And then then like Jake Bobo, and that's your receiver core. And then you've got, the 2 tackles, Charles Cross and Abe Lucas, who have been kind of underachieving since they had really nice rookie years a few years back. And then a lot of problems on the interior offensive line. So there's just still a lot of work that needs to be done, I think, in Seattle. And you have you have a new you're running a new offense with Clint Kubiak.
Yeah.
After they got rid of Ryan Grubb after 1 year. So I don't know. I think that they are not done. They can't be done right now. They have a lot more work to do. They need to get a perimeter field stretcher, and they need to get 1 or if not 2 starters on the interior offensive line.
Well, they have 5 picks now in the top 92 of the draft, right? So they're going to pick 5 times at least. We'll see what else they do in the first 92 picks of this draft. And there will be wide receivers available. There will certainly be offensive linemen available. I tweeted about this really good Athletic article. Highly recommend anyone interested in what the Seahawks are doing to read it. But yeah, I mean, they're making a lot of changes here on the fly. They're going to try to bolster the offensive line. They're going to try to run the ball more efficiency. We can expect more 2 wide receiver sets for the Seahawks. They're going to this zone scheme to help the offensive line. And so, I can see why there's optimism. The other reason there's optimism is that I think Geno Smith is just a better quarterback than Sam Darnold on base outcomes. But as you saw last year, I think the ceiling outcomes for Darnold are higher. Now, I think that, yeah, you saved a little bit of money. You got younger. There's some chance that Sam Darnold just stone cold face plants here in Seattle. Kevin O'Connell is the nuts as a pass game schemer. We saw guys like Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs have huge games with him. Darnold was playing at an MVP level last year for at least part of it, but he also got to play in a dome. He had Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Will it be the same here with JSN, most likely some rookies, Noah Fant as weapons? I guess one good thing we could say, Evan, is that early last year when Clint Kubiak was handling the Saints offense, they were absolutely shredding. And then Rashid Shaheed got hurt. And then Olave got hurt. And then every offensive lineman got hurt. And then Carr got hurt. But man, the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, Saints offense was absolutely shredding. And maybe he can do that here in Seattle. So yeah, any thoughts on Darnold with Kubiak here going forward?
It's just, I think that the roster is so incomplete right now that I'm not ready to jump to any conclusions at all. You mentioned they have 5 picks in the top 100, top 92. They need to hit on 4 of those guys. And again, they need multiple more starters. Yeah. So it's just, we'll see. JSN is looking like he's going to be an absolute target monster, though. I think we can say that with supreme confidence.
One thing is that we know Sam Darnold is very sensitive to pressure, right? It can go really bad. And I thought the Vikings offensive line played really well last season. I do not have the same level of faith that the Seahawks offensive line is going to give Sam Darnold the same type of protection. And that's when Sam Darnold starts to melt down here. Other thing that I'd say is that Seahawks have been just mediocre for a while, right? Like kind of purgatory, not a Super Bowl contender, not terrible. maybe Sam Darnold's kind of polar outcomes here where he could be really bad, he could be really good. Maybe that's actually a feature, not a bug for them. So yeah, we'll see. Just to put a bow on this, we are at 63 overall on George Pickens right now. We're down to 57 overall on DK Metcalf. Jackson Smith and Jigba, we've held relatively steady on here. 26 overall for us right now on
I was going to
Jackson
say,
Smith
I
and
think
Jigba.
JSN's got to be a top 25 player right
Yeah.
now.
All right. Let's go to story number 2, which was the Geno Smith part of this. Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders for a round 3 pick. Geno is probably better than I think he's better than most people realize, than the public perception, just because of the way his career started. Geno is very accurate. He's willing to stand in the pocket and take hits. He's shown a lot, man. I mean, he completed 70.4% of his passes last season while throwing for 4,300 yards. Now he goes to the Raiders. He'll play in a dome. He has Brock Bowers. He has Jacoby Myers. Evan, what did you think of the Raiders going out and getting Geno Smith?
Yeah, playing for Chip Kelly too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that could get real interesting, you know. I mean, the Raiders, you know, haven't really had a quality quarterback since that one year when Derek Carr was, you know, supposedly in the MVP competition, but really wasn't. You know, so it's been a long time. And I think that Geno Smith is like a top 15 quarterback in the NFL with like top 8 moments. You know, he's not particularly young. You know, he cost the Raiders, you know, a theoretically rebuilding team a top 75 pick.
Mm-hmm.
But I, you know, in order to shore up the quarterback position, obviously it's the most important position in all of sports. I mean, they went out and made this move, and they had to. You know, it's no more Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew kind of stuff. Like, they have a legitimate starting quarterback, and they felt like they needed that.
Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers were both
Yeah.
very viable last season with those dust ball quarterbacks, right? With AOC and with Gardner Minshew. Both those guys had really productive fantasy seasons. We're at 17 overall right now on Brock Bowers with Geno at quarterback, 70 overall on Jacoby Myers. Any thoughts on those guys and how they fit with Geno? Evan, there's not a lot of target competition, at least right now, for Bowers and Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great situation for both of them. The Raiders need to go out and get another guy, a guy who can win on the outside. Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers are really both players that win in the middle of the field, so they need talent on the perimeter. And Geno Smith can absolutely uncork it on the perimeter. So to fully, you know, get where they need to go, they need to make that addition. But it's a great situation for both Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, no question.
All right. Let's go to story 3, which was Davante Adams signing with the Los Angeles Rams, 2 years, up to $46 million, $26 million guaranteed. Now, this move was like, I was actually kind of surprised. This move was widely lauded on Twitter as like an absolute slam dunk, home run. Davante Adams is a great signing, great job by the Rams. Despite him turning 32 years old in December, Davante Adams has been very good the last couple years. He can play the X spot where Rams have had a hole. He can also play slot. You know, everybody says, oh, his releases work so well, Stafford football IQ. I'm a little bit skeptical just because of the age and some failures before at the X spot on Davante Adams. But I'm curious what you think here, Evan, on Davante Adams joining the Los Angeles Rams.
Well, if you are a competent receiver, Matthew Stafford can get you the rock. You know, I'm actually surprised that you kind of spun that a little negatively, because you've always been the Matthew Stafford kingmaker guy. I mean, I love the move. The Rams have not had that winning X receiver, with the exception of Odell Beckham, for a very short time span. You know, really under the Sean McVay regime. Now they have that. Whereas Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua were both players that won in the middle of the field. You know, now Cooper Kupp, like it sounds like they're gonna actually release him if they can't get like a 7th round pick for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have a guy who can win outside and a guy who can win in the middle of the field, and Davante Adams and Puka Nacua. They also gave Tutu Atwell a $10 million deal, which I thought was shocking. But you see the Dyami Brown deal to Jacksonville, and I guess that's the going rate now for situational number 3/4 receivers. But I think Tutu Atwell is probably going to have a spot in that 3 receiver set. he can at very least take the lid off. And then those other guys, I mean, I still think Davante Adams is awesome. I thought that we saw
Yeah.
that at the end of the season. Some of these receivers don't hit that wall until until they close in on their middle 30s, and I think that Davante Adams still has another year left. I mean, this is a Super Bowl. We talked about the offensive line on a previous show. This is a Super Bowl contending offense right now for the Rams. I think that they can be absolutely prolific.
I mean, that was why I was surprised that there were all these rumors they were going to blow it up and get rid of Stafford and everything. They were close to beating the Eagles in a snow game and going on to the NFC Championship game where they probably would have been favored over the Commanders. So, I like the move. I like going for it. I don't want to be a year late on like a 32-year-old wide receiver. And so we're at 32 overall on Davante Adams right now. He was going way later than that beforehand. And the reason that he's going up so much is because, frankly, what Evan said, Matthew Stafford has elevated wide receiver talent at every single stop. So, if Davante Adams still has plenty left in the tank, which last year I thought that he did, but he was also getting force-fed by Aaron Rodgers a ton, he's going to be fine. One thing that I thought that I had about this was like the Cooper Kupp stuff. I mean, Evan mentioned they're just going to get rid of him if they can't get a 7th-round pick. They didn't even entertain a renegotiation with Cooper Kupp, even though he was reportedly tight with Sean McVay, even though Cooper Kupp said he didn't want to leave. Like, I'm somewhat concerned for Cooper Kupp that Rams have seen it up close and they think he's totally cooked, right? So as of now, we're recording this Tuesday afternoon. Cooper Kupp has no home. I'm going to be real careful about getting excited about Cooper Kupp wherever he ends up landing, because they were just like, you know what? Forget it, Cooper Kupp. Let's give Davante Adams $26 million, even though Cooper Kupp could have probably renegotiated for significantly less than that. So yeah, Evan, any more thoughts on what's going on with Cooper Kupp? He's got to feel bad watching it, sitting at home being like, they dumped me after all I did for them. I had an incredible career. And then they turn around and give a similarly aged wide receiver $26 million guaranteed.
Well, I mean, no one has a better read on what's going on with Cooper Kupp than the Rams. We could see it from the outside that there were major issues, especially in the second half of last season. And, just the accumulate. I mean, I can remember the show that you did with Stephania Bell like 2 off seasons ago. And she was talking about the accumulation of injuries and how that can catch up to a player. And this is a player that has lived in the middle of the field, taking a lot of hits over the years. It's really not surprising, I think, at this point.
Oh, I wanted to get your take on the Puka Nacua stuff. So we went to 8 overall on Puka Nacua. So dropped him behind CeeDee Lamb, behind Nico Collins. I think that that's super tight there. I would not argue with anyone who wanted to take Puka above those guys. I think it's all the same tier to me. But do you think it's a downgrade for Puka at all with Davante Adams there? I will say Davante Adams' red zone target rate is really high, but a lot of that is because Aaron Rodgers just throws to Davante Adams all the time. I'm not sure Stafford is necessarily going to do that. But yeah, Evan, any thoughts on how the Davante thing affects Puka, if at all?
I think that that's totally fair. He's in that tier of those other guys. I think you mentioned CeeDee Lamb and Nico Collins, but maybe at the end of the tier after they acquired Davante Adams. That sounds totally fair to me.
Yeah, and we have him just above Amon-Ra, Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors. I mean, there's a lot of wide receivers that are going to go there in the back of round 1 that are certainly strong plays. Okay, let's get to a couple quarterback situations. Story number 4, Justin Fields signs with the Jets, 2 years, $40 million. We know the upside of Justin Fields. When he got benched last season, from a fantasy perspective, when he got benched last season, he was on pace to run for 14 touchdowns. And he also had a couple games where I was like, man, that was an impressive throwing day from Justin Fields. Now, he has had far, far more poor throwing days. Evan, what did you think of the Jets' move to go out and address their quarterback situation by getting Justin Fields?
Well, they just didn't have any better alternatives. So I think this was actually a win for the Jets, because I think that they did about the best that they possibly could have done. It's funny, Justin Fields would absolutely shred Aaron Glenn's Lions every single time that they would play as a runner. I mean, just monster games against Aaron Glenn's Lions. And now, Aaron Glenn is the head coach of Justin Fields with the Jets. Justin Fields is probably not a long-term solution. He's going to, disappoint at times and make highlight reel plays at times. And he's going to be good in fantasy. I mean, what you do when you have Justin Fields, you don't want him dropping back at a super high voluminous rate. So that is something of a threat to like Garrett Wilson. At the same time, we saw, 2 years ago, DJ Moore, the best year of his career with Justin Fields in Chicago. So Justin Fields can, especially in a scenario where like he's going to lock on to a one guy, which he has a tendency to do, to not get off his first read. That's going to be Garrett Wilson with the Jets. Again, I don't expect a super high throw rate or anything like that, but I don't feel like horrible about Garrett Wilson at this point or anything like that. And I saw some people on Twitter saying that this is not a good situation for Garrett Wilson. What better situation scenario could you have come up with, among the available quarterbacks for the cause of Garrett Wilson? I think that this is fine. I think it's a fine result.
Yeah. And I mean, Justin Fields can get you into some wild games, right? He throws pick sixes. He can get in some wild spots for Justin Fields. Also, we have the shower narrative in play here. Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson did play together for 2 years at Ohio State. That was Garrett Wilson's freshman and sophomore season. Sophomore year was marred by COVID. Freshman season, he was more like the wide receiver 4, but still, at least they played together. Garrett Wilson caught 11 touchdowns from Fields. Fields did throw 63 touchdowns over those 2 seasons. At least they're boys, though. They may or may not have experienced the showers together, though, therefore making that bond. I'll say on a serious note, from real life perspective, I really like the deal for the Jets. I mean, Fields is only 26. I still think he has a chance to hit some kind of ceiling. And there's only $20 million a year. I mean, that's not even like real starter money at the quarterback position. If you give Justin Fields a ton of zone reads, a ton of play action, rollouts, tush push, like actually build the offense around him, I actually think it can kind of work. So I'm not going to be super high on this Jets offense, I don't think. But for fantasy, I agree with Evan. Justin Fields can easily be a solid play. We have him at 128 overall right now, kind of in the same range as Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, guys like that in fantasy right now.
Yeah, I mean, think about like 2 weeks ago when we did our show, or maybe it was last week. I don't know, all the stuff that has happened in the last couple of days makes it feel like it was 2 weeks ago. We were literally talking about Tyrod Taylor maybe being the Jets starting quarterback in 2025.
He's going to be the backup now. Yep.
Right. And Tyrod Taylor's 36 years old. Yeah. So this is just a way, way better situation for Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, everybody.
Okay. Speaking of dusty-ish quarterbacks, story 5, Daniel Jones signs with the Colts, the artist formerly known as Danny Dimes, 1 year, $14 million. And the report out of Indy is this will be an open competition between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. I'm curious your take on that, Evan. I have some takes, but I'm curious your reaction to Daniel Jones to the Colts, and if you believe this will actually be an open competition between Anthony Richardson and Danny Dimes.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts have been saying since the combine that they were going to open the quarterback spot to competition, and that's not surprising considering the performance of Anthony Richardson over the last 2 seasons. You cannot be a starting quarterback in the NFL barely completing 50% of your passes.
And take yourself out of the game.
And piss off the starting center, who is now gone, by the way. And Shane Steichen wants to like run an offense where, I mean, Shane Steichen has a good offense. They've got pieces at receiver. They've got, they're bringing back 4 of their critical offensive linemen. They did lose Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, but they had Taylor Bartolini, who out of Wisconsin, who they ran out there in place of Ryan Kelly last year, and he did pretty well. And they're bringing back their left tackle, their stud left guard, Quentin Nelson, and their starting right tackle, Braden Smith. So they still have the pieces of at least being a competent offense. And I think Anthony Richardson will be the week 1 starter, and he will get every opportunity. They need to give him every opportunity to succeed. But if by week 4 they are unable to execute the offense because Anthony Richardson can't complete passes and keeps, running out of the structure, like it would not be surprising at all if Danny Dimes goes in and maybe even starts the rest of the season if Shane Steichen is like, this guy can actually run my offense. The other guy is not doing that.
That's totally fair. My initial thought was that if Anthony Richardson cannot beat out Daniel Jones for this job, then forget it. It's like he's total toast, or maybe he's too young to say that or whatever. But man, if you can't beat out Daniel Jones for this starting job, you have big time problems if you are Anthony Richardson. I'm curious, Evan, for fantasy, who would you rather have, Richardson or Fields? Right. I'll say this right now. We have Fields ahead just because we feel better about job security, just because of what you said. If you take Anthony Richardson in best ball right now and he loses the job to Daniel Jones midway through the year, that's a problem. I think Fields maybe has more job security as of now, but on a per game basis, I think you could make different arguments. What do you think about Fields versus A-Rich in fantasy?
Well, one thing that we didn't even bring up is how much money the Colts gave Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
1 year, $14 million, with over 13 and a half of that guaranteed, the opportunity to make up to $18 million if he takes the starting job. That's a significant amount of money. And what I wrote in the free agent tracker, like, if you were just lay out the options, obviously the Colts weren't going to go get like a top tier quarterback on the trade or the free agent market. But if you were to just lay out the potential options entering free agency for the Colts, this is about the best that they could have done, and the most competition that they could bring in for Anthony Richardson. And they paid Daniel Jones commensurate with that.
Yeah.
So I think that Anthony Richardson has very shaky job security, and Justin Fields, based on his contract, which isn't, super, super significant for actual starting quarterbacks. But I mean, when Tyrod Taylor is the next guy up at age 36, Justin Fields has way more job security. So, and I think maybe if we were just going for one game, I might take Anthony Richardson from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah.
But over the course of the season, no question, I think it's Justin Fields.
Okay. Story 6, Chris Godwin re-signs with the Tampa Bay Bucks, 3 years, $66 million, $44 million guaranteed. There's reports out there that he left as much as $20 million on the table to go back to the Bucks, which, shout out to him, I would not do. I mean, I'll just tell you right now, I would not leave $20 million on the table no matter what. That said, Chris Godwin was absolutely smashing last season. He was on pace for 121, 1399, 12 last season. Easily one of the best picks in all of fantasy. Then he dislocates his ankle in garbage time of week 7. So I get it. I'll leave some money on the table to come back because I had an incredible role and was playing incredibly well. I was having fun. I love Baker. I love Mike Evans, etc. I get it. Evan, what was your reaction to Chris Godwin re-upping with the Bucks?
This offense has the potential to be awesome again. It kind of sucks that they are again losing their offensive coordinator. Liam Cohen went to become the Jaguars head coach, but from a personnel standpoint, the Bucs should be able to kick ass again. I mean, Baker Mayfield has really found himself in Tampa Bay. Mike Evans still playing at a high level. Jalen McMillions really came on in the second half of the year, and Chris Godwin was playing like up there, maybe the best football of his career. You remember the year before, he really didn't play that well, coming off the double knee ligament tear. He came back on a tear last year before he went down. I fully expect him to be back at 100%. The offensive line is awesome in Tampa Bay, and they return every single guy. Their offense should absolutely kill again. I'm excited about it.
I mean, Baker, I was so impressed by the way Baker played last year. Like, so impressed.
And didn't even mention Bucky Irving, your boy, who you're drafting like in the first round.
I love Bucky and yeah, I mean, I love McMillan, and God, I mean, it's exciting for them right now. We have so many Bucks guys ranked in the top 150 for best ball right now, including Godwin. We're way ahead of market here at 53 overall on Godwin. Baker is in there at 83 overall as well. And so, yeah, obviously really exciting for the Bucks, and shout out Penn State. Happy for Chris Godwin as well. Story 7, Aaron Jones re-signs with the Vikings. This was kind of a big number for a running back who'll be 31 in December. Aaron Jones, 2 years, $20 million, $13 million guaranteed. Now, to Aaron Jones' credit, he did play in all 17 games last year. He was nicked up in a bunch of them, but that's standard for him. Evan, what did you think of Vikings going ahead and giving $13 million guaranteed to Aaron Jones?
Yeah, it was a little bit more than I expected. I actually kind of thought that they might let him walk. But I know that they love him. He's like a great locker room guy. He's like a legit leader. He's really good. I know he gets nicked up. You want to scale him back. You really want him to be like around like 60% of the usage, 60% of the snaps. And they said that at one point this offseason that they wanted to scale him back. They haven't went out and gotten anybody to really scale him back with. You still have Ty Chandler Um, but I mean, we can rely on this offense. They went out and they signed Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, and the other three guys that they're bringing back on the offensive line are good. I mean, Christian Darrisaw is back from injury. Blake Brandel has emerged as a really solid left guard, and then Brian O'Neill is a stud right tackle when healthy. And then they short up center and right guard. So it's a good situation for Aaron Jones. Again, not your super high volume workhorse, but is going to be efficient, good in the passing game, good for JJ McCarthy. Feel very confident right now about the offense in Minnesota, even though they're changing quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I mean Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, I mean their offensive line could be very, very, very good this season upcoming.
Yeah, those were the two positions that they had a good offensive line at three positions last year, but Ed Ingram stunk at right guard, and Garrett Bradbury has always been, he was a first-round pick, but he's never been that good. They shored up they targeted those two positions, and they nailed them.
Right. And, quietly, Vikings are on a rookie contract. We'll see how good J.J. McCarthy is, but they have a quarterback on a rookie contract, which allows them to spend money like this. We're at 82 overall on Aaron Jones right now, which is above ADP when he plays and when he is 100%, as Evan said, very, very efficient still. But another guy, has to be getting towards the end in terms of age. Story number 8 comes from the running back position as well. Najee Harris signs with the Chargers, 1 year, $9.25 million. So J.K. Dobbins remains unsigned. I've been a J.K. Dobbins kind of fader. Not that I dislike him as a person, even though he dunked on me on Twitter a long time ago. But I was so impressed by what J.K. Dobbins did last year coming off the injury. I did not think that was in the range. Chargers apparently weren't that impressed. J.K. Dobbins is still out there on the street. They give Najee Harris 1 year, $9.25 million. Evan, what do you think of Chargers making a switch here at running back? And by the way, Gus Edwards is also gone.
Well, I think it was a really interesting signing because, we've kind of been Najee Harris haters to an extent here. I mean, I have for years, I would cite the statistic that he could never hit 20-plus yard runs.
Yeah.
And then I think you put it on Twitter that he had 9 runs of 20-plus yards last year.
Yep, 5th most in the league. I mean, only Saquon, Henry, Gibbs, and where is it here? Saquon, Arca Gibbs, and Jonathan Taylor had more 20-yard runs than Najee Harris last year, which is absolutely insane. But yeah, go ahead.
I don't think he's all of a sudden, a home run hitting guy. But, I mean, he did show that he could do that. He had one of the highest broken tackle rates in the NFL. And dude has never missed a game.
Yeah.
And now he is going to a spot with the Chargers where Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh, they run the ball with volume. And he can pass protect and he can catch passes. So, I don't know, man. It's kind of like a really nice situation. He is one of these guys that is going to fall into the bucket of you're betting on volume, even when you know that he is not like a supreme talent. And we can get into trouble betting on guys like that. Lord knows that I have, and I may again. But I if you were to draw up a situation for Najee Harris to go to, this might have been the best one possible. I do think that they would be smart to bring back J.K. Dobbins and use him as in the home run hitting role, maybe with 8 to 12 touches a game. I think that would be great for him. But right now, I mean, Najee Harris is in line to average 20 carries a game for the Chargers.
Clearly one of the best possible, if not the best possible landing spot for Najee Harris, given their offensive line, given their philosophy, and given what else is there. We're up to 73 overall, which is way ahead of market here on Najee Harris in the best ball ranks. I mean, J.K. Dobbins ran for 9 touchdowns in 13 games last season. Gus Edwards ran for 4. Hassan Askins added 2. I mean, there's touchdowns available here for Najee Harris to score for this team. So, yeah, it's not exciting. I agree with Evan that the 9 carries of 20-plus yards last year seemed a little fluky, but he was certainly faster and more explosive last year, and it could have been that weight thing. We talk about it all the time. I like when running backs drop weight, man. I want them faster. I want them thinner as long as they're able to sustain on it. So, yeah, really interesting spot for Najee Harris. Speaking of interesting and running backs, story 9, Javonte Williams, 1 year, up to $3.5 million with the Dallas Cowboys. Very, very cheap deal here for Javonte Williams. I suspect that's why they went with Javonte over Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle remains a free agent as of this recording. Javonte Williams, of course, was an exciting prospect, number 35 overall pick in 2021. He's still only 24 years old. The problem is that knee injury he sustained a couple years ago. A lot of people, including me, are worried he's just toast. I mean, just bad. I mean, he was so bad last year. He got outplayed by Jaleel McLaughlin, Estime, Blake Watts. I mean, everybody was outplaying Javonte Williams for most of last year. Evan, what do you think of Cowboys' decision to go ahead and sign Javonte?
Well, just as this deal was being reported, David Moore of the Dallas Morning News reported simultaneously that Rico Dowdle will not be back with the Cowboys, which is kind of a travesty because Rico Dowdle was way better than Javonte Williams last year. I mean, do you remember there was a game where Javonte Williams actually played a decent number of snaps, but the Broncos only used him in pass protection. He had 0 carries in the game. That's kind of where he is. He's a pass protection specialist. I don't know if the Cowboys, well, this is what often happens. Like a team will like a player coming out of college and then they will kind of hang on to that scouting report and the guy becomes a free agent. They can get him for fairly cheap. Oh, remember when Javonte Williams did this when he was at UNC? Like, who cares? Like, we don't care about that. But some teams do still lean on that. And I think that's what the Cowboys are doing. They didn't give him a lot of money.
Right.
And they could easily go still draft a guy that could outplay Javonte Williams. I think that's probably what will happen.
Yeah.
But it's kind of unfair to Rico Dowdle. And it's another situation where, Rico Dowdle was one of these undrafted free agents. He plays really well. The team doesn't care because they never invested anything into him, and they have no problem letting him walk.
Yeah, I mean, you could make a speculative pick on Javonte Williams right now. We are baking into the rankings that we expect them to take a running back in the draft. I mean, you can't go to the season with Javonte Williams on a 1-year, $3.5 million contract. That said, if Javonte Williams is the feature back for this Cowboys team, I don't think any of us think Rico Dowdle is that good. He had some very productive fantasy games and some very high usage games, did Rico Dowdle down the stretch there. So there's certainly opportunity here, but expecting Javonte to face competition. Story 10, Hollywood Brown back to the Chiefs on a 1-year, $11 million deal. A lot of questions here in terms of pass catchers for the Chiefs. Rashee Rice has the possible suspension and injury around him. Xavier Worthy had some weird off-field stuff going on with him. Seems like he's going to be fine now. We're not projecting any suspension for now, but we'll see. Travis Kelce is back, but a ton of questions there. So I actually thought that Hollywood Brown was kind of a need. Even though I didn't think he played that well last year, I thought it was a pretty good move to re-sign him 1 year, $11 million. Evan, what do you think of Chiefs bringing back Hollywood?
Yeah, and he's another guy who's in that like De'Ami Brown, Tutu Atwell range in terms of 1 year, like $10 million roughly deal. And I would way rather have Hollywood Brown than Tutu Atwell or De'Ami Brown.
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins is a free agent. Juju Smith-Schuster is a free agent. Mecole Hardman is a free agent. Yeah, I mean, I think it made a lot of sense for the team. Right now, Hollywood Brown looks like he's in really nice position. I guess, I don't know, Dago put it in the free agent tracker. I haven't really been looking at ADP, but he wrote in the free agent tracker that Hollywood Brown's ADP before this re-signing in like best ball under. I can't believe it. You know what? I'm gonna keep my opinions to myself. Hollywood Brown's ADP was like 10th or 11th round before free agency, and like he should easily be like a 6th or 7th round pick. This probably bumped him by several rounds.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't go that high on him right now.
He looks like their potential number 2 receiver to open the season.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm still holding out hope that Rashee Rice is going to be cleared, not suspended, healthy. I also thought that the way Xavier Worthy closed last year was just so impressive. They did try. The bull case on Marquise Brown is that they tried to force feed him the ball. His targets per route run was really high for a bit when he got back from that really bad injury. He didn't get back until week 16, but his targets per route run was really high in week 1 before he got hurt. The problem is he wasn't that productive on it. And then the playoffs, his targets per route run cooled off big time as Xavier Worthy started going nuts. But
the injury like screwed him.
Yeah.
I mean, he never really had a shot.
He's still young. I mean, he's still 27. Marquise Brown won't be 28 until next season. So I get that there's hope, but yeah, we have him down at 120 overall still. we'll see on what happens to all
So
this
what's
cheap.
that, like 8th or ninth round?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we need to see what happens, I think, with the Rashee Rice suspension, Xavier Worthy possible suspension, etc. But yeah. All right. Story 11. As we talked about on the offseason cuts show, Jaguars did what we talked about at the open of that show. They released Evan Ingram. They trade Christian Kirk to the Texans for a round 7 pick. I guess let's start with the Texans side of this. Evan, what do you think of Texans making the move for Christian Kirk? Steph Diggs, as of this recording, is still a free agent. Tank Dell is almost certainly out for the entire 2025 season. So Nico Collins needs help. I thought the Christian Kirk move was a sharp one for a 7th round pick. What do you think of Christian Kirk in Houston with CJ Stroud, Evan?
I love this move. It didn't cost him anything. He is a great compliment, I think, to Nico Collins. Christian Kirk can win in the slot and can run vertical routes from the slot. And if you look what they've been doing, the Texans over the past few years at slot receiver, like John Mechie, Robert Woods, Noah Brown, they just have been kind of not taking that position seriously. And I think that Christian Kirk gives you a serious slot receiver who can win at multiple levels and gets Nico Collins help, because the depth chart after him was virtually barren before they went and got Christian Kirk. I love the move for the Texans.
Okay, while we're talking about, I agree. And while on the other side, while we're talking about the Jaguars here, we mentioned De'Ami Brown signed with the Jaguars 1 year, $10 million. So Ingram and Kirk are gone. I think the 3 wide receiver set might actually be Brian Thomas Jr. and De'Ami on the outside, Parker Washington in the slot, Gabe Davis as the number 4. But I could be off there. Maybe that's too harsh on Gabe Davis. What do you think about what's left here for the Jaguars as they completely flip over their pass catching core?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it's like a 1 year, $10 million deal for De'Ami Brown.
Yep.
Who I think that he can do a little bit more than just be a perimeter like field stretcher. I think that we saw that last year with Washington. He made some plays after the catch that you really don't see Gabe Davis make. Gabe Davis is a pure perimeter guy. He played like, when I put the stats in the free agent tracker, it's like 82% of his snaps or something on the outside. I just think that might be, and this is a new regime now in Jacksonville, and the previous Jacksonville regime gave Gabe Davis a bunch of money that he didn't really deserve that. So his job is now up. I just think it's a competition. It's Brian Thomas as the clear alpha, and then a competition between the other guys. And the Jaguars are going to go with their new regime. They're going to go figure that stuff out in training camp. De'Ami Brown had, a nice kind of little run at the end of last season. But they're just going to figure it out on the practice field.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, also, it's only been a year, but I kind of think Jaden Daniels is a massive talent elevator. I'm not sure Trevor Lawrence is that. And so when you start talking about De'Ami Brown, it's like, yeah, he was awesome last year. I thought maybe a lot of that has because Jaden Daniels is just an absolute stud. Let's go to story number 12 here. Josh Palmer to the Bills on a 3-year, $36 million deal. I saw a lot of Buffalo people like really excited about this. I was disappointed by Josh Palmer last season. He got outplayed by Ladd McConkey. Okay, fine. But he got really outplayed by Quentin Johnston a lot too. And I drafted a lot of Josh Palmer last year under the assumption that he was going to earn targets at a really high rate. He didn't do it. Evan, what do you think of Bill's decision to go for 3 years, $36 million on Josh Palmer?
Not that the free agent market is teeming with needle movers at wide receiver, but this guy is not a needle mover, Josh Palmer. And I think he's a fine pro. He's definitely a guy that you can run your offense with, a fine number 3, a very good number 4, but just another guy who's going to jump into this rotation. We saw it, and it wasn't just at receiver. Last year with Joe Brady, it was at tight end. It was at running back. He believes in a rotation at every skill position. And so from fantasy, from a fantasy perspective, not very good for Josh Palmer either, even though he's jumping into an offense with Josh Allen. I think he's just going to be another rotational player. I think that they'll hope that Keon Coleman can take a leap. They love Khalil Shakir. They gave him that extension. He's the slot player. Mm-hmm. And then they have Curtis Samuel, who they gave money to last year, and he's kind of always, never really lived up to any kind of expectations. And they'll add more guys. They did let Matt Collins go to New England. But yeah, just another rotational receiver for Joe Brady's rotational receiver room.
I mean, Amari Cooper is a free agent, right? And the Bills, if you read that Matthew Berry article we talked about on the last show, he seemed to suggest that someone he talked to at the Bills thinks that Amari Cooper is just totally cooked. And the free agent market might be bearing that out. I mean, if Josh Palmer gets more money than Amari Cooper, I don't know, man. That's like a really weird sentence for me to say right there. But the Bills might actually think that. And if they're going to go with a three wide receiver set of like Shakir, Palmer, Keon Coleman, rotating Curtis Samuel. Yeah, I mean, can see it, but I'm worried for Amari Cooper. For sure.
Remember how awesome Amari Cooper was in 2023?
It's great. Like, could it fall?
He'll be a guy that, I mean, he'll eventually find a home, but he'll be a guy I would like to see Matt Harmon's charting on from last year.
Yep. All right. Story 13, Mike Gesicki re-signs with the Bengals 3 years, $25.5 million. From a fantasy perspective, Mike Gesicki was very viable last season when T. Higgins missed games. He'll probably be viable again if T or Chase or if Jamar Chase misses games this season. Gesicki had 8 games last year with 4 more catches. And for a dusty tight end, for a late round tight end, that's pretty good. The thing is, he's not really a tight end. Gesicki was lined up in line for just 65 of his 523 snaps last season, 12%. Gesicki was slot or wide on 88% of his snaps last season. So he's basically an oversized wide receiver that you're kind of paying tight end money to. What do you think, Evan, of Gesicki back to the Bengals here?
Well, I kind of thought it was like, T. Higgins is sitting here wearing this $26 million or whatever it is cap charge with the franchise tag, and they're out here giving Mike Gesicki money that I don't know if any other team would have matched. Yeah. I do like Mike Gesicki's fit in the offense. They really found a role for him, and a lot of teams have tried to find a role for Mike Gesicki and just can never make it work. But with Joe Burrow, like, a lot of things can work, and Mike Gesicki worked with in that system. It's just like, how about the extension for T. Higgins or the extension for Jamar Chase? And then they get from that standpoint, I was like, what? But again, good system fit. Really, it's a good fantasy situation. I guess they're just going to leave T. Higgins on the cap number and just carry that again.
Yeah, and it sounds like maybe Trey Hendrickson is the one that is going to get a deal from the Bengals here. Yeah,
because he's on the trade market now.
Yeah, I'm still trying to think about like my strategy at tight end for this year. We currently have Gesicki ranked around guys like Brenton Strange, Dalton Schultz, Harold Fannin. We'll see what his landing spot is. But yeah, I mean, he's a late round tight end that I'm at least interested in because when one of T or Chase is out, he is a reliable performer at the position. Let's go to a few more small ones here before we get out of here. Jaylen Warren got a second round restricted free agent tender from the Steelers. He'll make roughly $5.3 million. We already talked about how Najee Harris is gone. Steelers put this tender on. They ensure that Jaylen Warren will be back with the team. Obviously, no one's going to give up a second round pick for Jaylen Warren. I'm not sold by everybody who tells me that Jaylen Warren can't get more work. They told me Devon Achane can't stay healthy for 17 games in a feature role. Guess what? He did. They told me Chase Brown can't hold up to a full workload. Guess what? He did. Let me see Jaylen Warren for 15 touches a game. Let me see it. So Najee gone. Restricted free agent tender. Maybe I'm too excited here, Evan, yet again about Jaylen Warren, but what do you think about the Jaylen Warren, the Steelers backfield?
Yeah, and it's not only the second round restricted tender, which because he was undrafted, like, you got to give them that. You have to give him the second round tender, and he's a good player. I mean, period. He's really, really good in the passing game, very efficient. He's been hurt quite a bit. He's kind of small. So the way that I try to get in the coach's head, and to me, Arthur Smith is just not going to commit like a huge workload to Jaylen Warren. But they are paying him a decent amount of money now. You add another field stretcher in DK Metcalf, which I think can be good for the running game. They showed that they had a nice running game. Again, they were popping those 20-yard runs last year. Their offensive line is like fully intact. So I mean, you can build it's just I'm worried like a lot of running back situations are going to get nuked by this draft class.
Yeah, exactly.
What I continually hear is that this draft class goes deep. It's going to go into the fourth round of NFL contributors, and those guys can make immediate impacts at that position. And so I think that the Steelers are might draft 2 running backs. You look at their depth chart right now. It's Jalen Warren and like nobody.
Right.
So I think they have CPAT under contract, which he doesn't really count.
Yeah.
But I think they could draft 2 running backs.
Yeah. And so we'll see what happens. For now, we are baking in that risk. Obviously, if they don't draft anyone, Jalen Warren's going to go way up. If they draft someone good.
Jalen Warren could also beat out the 2 running backs, though. I mean, he's good and he's got experience in the system. We know he's versatile. That is a possibility too. So I don't want to discount that. I kind of want to be right there with you with Jalen Warren. It's just when I get into Arthur Smith's head, I don't know.
For now, we're at 84 overall, which among other running backs, that's like where we have Aaron Jones, Tyrone Tracy, Tony Pollard. So, we'll see what happens, but I don't want to like completely discount that Jalen Warren can handle more work. Samaje Perine to the Bengals, 2 years up to $3.8 million. I know this one barely hit anyone's radar. The only reason I wanted to bring this one up, Evan, is that if they only add Samaje Perine to this backfield, and we're expecting Zach Moss to get cut, as we talked about on a previous show, if Samaje Perine is the only add here, they don't add a rookie, I mean, Chase Brown is just a turbo smash, just an absolute turbo smash. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. Maybe this Perine signing keeps them from drafting a running back. I doubt it, but maybe it does. Any thoughts on Perine going back to his roots here? He used to be Joe Mixon's backup. Now he will be Chase Brown's backup.
If this is it, and this is the final, addition that the Bengals make at running back, I mean, how is Chase Brown not like a second round fantasy pick with first round upside?
Oh yeah.
I don't know how he wouldn't be. Samaje Perine is like the perfect guy for the other running back in the backfield to excel. We saw that with Kareem Hunt last year, and like nobody even wants Kareem Hunt in the NFL. Like he's gone. The Chiefs are like done with him, even though he was productive. Like Samaje Perine is gonna take away the downs that aren't productive in fantasy, blitz protect, and like the team that has him never wants to give him the ball and wants to give the ball to the other running back all the time. I mean, it's the perfect situation for Chase Brown. I'm really, really excited about Chase Brown and really excited that this might be the final piece in the Bengals backfield.
We have Chase Brown 34th overall right now. If they do not draft a running back, we'll certainly be higher. I mean, certainly be way higher on Chase Brown than that. Okay. We better address offensive line stuff before we get out of here. Offensive line bros. We'll, of course, talk to Brandon Thorne later this offseason about offensive line stuff. I was struck by what the Texans are doing, and I was hoping Evan could shed some light on what you think they're doing. Texans give up Laramie Tunsil. They also give up Kenyon Green, who was a 2022 round 1 pick. And this comes after everybody blamed the offensive line for CJ Stroud's woes. So I assume they have a plan here. I'm not sure exactly what it is. What do you think about what the Texans have done letting go of both Laramie Tunsil and Kenyon Green here so far?
Well, the Texans had a really, really good defense last year, and they had Nico Collins balling out. They did lose the other 2 receivers, Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs, and they lost Nico Collins for 4 games. And they had, Joe Mixon had a really nice season, really, all things considered. So, the passing game was just a massive disappointment, and that was due to offensive line and scheme. They get rid of the schemer in Bobby Slowick, and they are just churning out the offensive line. I know for a fact that they were very disappointed in Laramie Tunsil throughout last year. I think the coaching staff had issues with him behind closed doors. He was a false start machine last year, and he had the worst season of his career. And I don't want to say that it was unsurprising that they got rid of him, but really in hindsight, it kind of wasn't surprising because of all those issues. They are leaving themselves a glaring hole at left tackle. I mean, they do not have a guy. I mean, they did draft Blake Fisher out of Notre Dame and he was supposed to be a right tackle. They drafted him last year in 2024 with a second round pick. But I don't think he's anybody's idea of a starting left tackle, and there are no like viable starting left tackles on the free agent market. So they wanted to get rid of Laramie Tunsil.
Yeah.
They wanted him out the door. I think that they actually considered him a toxic presence for the other players on the team. The Commanders are taking a fine risk in terms of draft pick compensation from that standpoint, but the Texans wanted to change this entire thing because that was what they felt torpedoed their season this past year, the scheme and the offensive line personnel.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to need to add talent, though. Like, it's great. Okay, we got rid of a bad apple. He wasn't playing poorly. You got to find some talent on the offensive line and get it injected into the building. So we'll see. On the other side of the coin, last thing we're going to do here today is Bears offensive line. We talked a little bit last week about the Jonah Jackson, Joe Thuney moves. Then they go out and sign center Drew Dahlman to a $42 million deal, $28 million guaranteed. So you see what the Bears are doing here. They're like, Caleb was under pressure. It caused him to drop his eyes. It caused him to not play the way he's capable of playing. Let's just sink the load, sink everything we have into offensive line. Hope that solves what happened to Caleb as a rookie. Evan, what do you think about Bears offensive line after they added Drew Dahlman along with Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney?
Well, I get excited about situations where it seems like a team has a clear-cut plan and like executes it. And I think that the Bears came in with a plan. I think that they did want Trey Smith. Trey Smith was in Kansas City when he was drafted in Kansas City when Ryan Poles was there. But, that turned out to not be an option because the Chiefs franchise tagged him. And so they went to plan B. They traded for Joe Thuney. Obviously, they brought in Ben Johnson to be their head coach. Ben Johnson ran a really super high rate of outside zone running scheme last year in Detroit. That's what Zach Robinson ran in Atlanta. And so Drew Dahlman, very familiar with that, very athletic, perfect fit for that scheme. He will play center. The Bears had maybe the worst center situation in football last year. At right guard, they go and get a guy that Jonah Jackson, who Ben Johnson knew from Detroit. He obviously knows the scheme. And Joe Thuney at left guard can play in like any scheme and is one of the best pass protecting guards in football. So I think that the Bears had a strategy and they executed it. And time will tell whether or not it works, but it makes a lot of sense on paper.
Yeah, I mean, no more excuses for Caleb, right? I mean, he has the coach now. He should have the scheme now. He has the offensive line now. I don't want to hear if Caleb goes out and takes 60 sacks next year that it was somebody else's fault. Like, at some point, it's got to be on the quarterback. So, yeah, excited to see what Caleb can do here this year. All right. That is going to do it for what I believe will be part one of our free agency reaction show. We'll likely be back later this week to go over some of the more moves that happen and some of the lesser players that still need to be signed. Still some good names out there, though. J.K. Dobbins, or at least some interesting names. J.K. Dobbins, Amari Cooper, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Stephon Diggs, all still out there. We'll go over those guys' landing spots hopefully later this week. Be sure you are subscribed on YouTube. It is indeed free, as well as on iTunes. And if you want more free agency coverage, which I know you all do, Evan, Daigle, Jack, everybody on the best ball team, all working on our rankings, plus the free agency tracker, plus the Fallout articles, and everything else. For Evan, producer Ryan, producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.